Well, welcome to another episode of The Warrior's Walk. Today, we're going to be talking about strategies for sharing the gospel in daily interactions. So stay tuned for our episode today. Now, if you are just joining us and you're new to the podcast, my name is Keith Seymour. I serve in local church ministry, nonprofit ministry, specifically around helping the next generation to know, own, and share the gospel. So I've been in youth ministry for several years. And then we have Pastor Todd Peters here, who is a retired Navy SEAL. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. As Keith said, retired from the military, just had a wonderful time serving with a lot of wonderful individuals. And then for about the last 12 years, been serving here at McLean Bible Church. Started off in youth ministry, and then they shifted me over to the grown-up church side of things and been leading the grown-ups. But I've heard from them that they like being treated like a giant youth group. So I think I've arrived where I belong.
All right. Good stuff. Well, today's topic is something that's really been on the forefront of our hearts and minds. It's something that we share a lot about because we're passionate about it ourselves, but really sharing the gospel in daily interactions, making it a lifestyle of evangelism. And so I know even during your military career, you had lots of opportunities to invest in guys that you were close with. I mean, you had really like battle buddies, literally, on the battlefield, and with close proximity, you developed a lot of good relationships. But I'm curious if you could share a story about how you got a phone call one day from one of your past buddies from the SEALs.
Yeah. So I had a teammate that we did a couple platoons together, and just they called him my mini-me, and really interesting guy, but certainly was not someone who was following the Lord at all. And he ended up getting medically discharged from the military, and I hadn't heard from him in quite some time, and then probably a decade had passed when I received a phone call from him. And it started off a little like this. He just said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I had a lot of respect for you, and I just want to say goodbye." And I was like, "Well, hang on. Like, what do you mean goodbye?" And he said, "Yeah, like some things happened in my life, and I'm about to go kill my wife and the guy she's having an affair with." And so, of course, my heart just dropped, and I was praying like I've never prayed before. And over the next couple of hours, this man realized who he was and how lost he was, and he gave his life to Christ. And today, I'm happy to say, still married to the wonderful lady, and kids are doing well. They've had another one since then. They're growing up, and they're following the Lord. And so it's a reminder, like, even like, no matter how far gone the situation seems, like Christ can redeem and restore a life.
Yeah. And with that too, I mean, we often think of like, opportunities to share the gospel, in our daily lifestyle, that we think like, okay, we have to see results right then and there. And sometimes it can be over time, where you're sowing those seeds and you never know that opportunity that's going to come where, that person will call upon you, or, call upon, it's like, oh, who was it that knows what he's talking about here? That's shared this with me before. And there's been instances in my life where, even as a high school student, where I was sharing the gospel with some of my, what I call cruddy buddies, people that they're hanging out with that didn't know Jesus, and they were in completely different lifestyle than I was, and was really bold in trying to share my faith with them, like passionately, relationally with them, who rejected me completely, but then later have come back and even just said like, hey, like I know, what you're trying to do, like back then, like, you took a lot of persecution from us from that regard, but I respected that a lot. Even I never said that back then, but like I respected you a lot for that, just by being bold. And so sometimes we think that those things are in vain. We're just like, well, I shared, or I was kind of this person, or lived a lifestyle of obedience by sharing with them, but we don't see those results right away. So, there's other times where we just get those results right away, where we're unexpected. I remember there's been times in my faith journey where, I've shared with someone and they're like, yeah, like I want to accept Christ right now. And I'm like, what? like, are you sure? Like, because I just wasn't expecting it to be like this, this thing that was the tipping point for their lives, where it just happened to be an intersection where I was just the last person that needed to share with them before they were like, yeah, that makes sense. And I remember there was a group of students and we were sharing out in the public, and we came across this group of two kids that were riding bikes, and I used to ride BMX bikes like way back in the day, so I connected them over that, and I even like, I was like, can I show you, a trick for this old guy, and they're like, oh yeah, here's my bike, and I just, got on the bike, whatever, and attempted some kind of trick, and they were, I guess, somewhat impressed, because then they listened to me and shared the gospel with them, just opened up and said, why we're out here, we're just trying to tell people about Jesus, and they're like, yeah, like that makes sense. I was like, wait, are you sure? Like, it was just so random and out of like nowhere that I didn't think that it was going to be that effective right then. But the Lord had been doing a work in their life that just really connected the dots right then and there, just on this random parking garage where they were just out riding their bikes. So now tell us a little bit about like some pointers for someone out there that might not have the confidence to share. What are some kind of easy ins, so to speak, of even sharing with strangers, in public? What are some things that you'd recommend of living that lifestyle of evangelism, even to strangers in public?
Yeah, so many thoughts. Even when you were sharing, I was reflecting on the very first person that responded to the gospel. And I was, 16, I put a stake in the ground. I was like, I'm going to follow the Lord. I realized there was a cost to it, but I was so excited understanding what God did for me, saving me from my sin, that I was pretty fired up and motivated. And so I invited this buddy of mine in a class I had named Eric, and we went out for a drive, and I had my 1970 Pontiac Catalina that had been hit by a semi truck. The whole back end was missing, like perfect setting to go share Christ with a buddy. Had my boombox with Petra playing, had my cassette tape in there. And I remember the song in the background. It was Grave Robber, and based off of 1 Corinthians. And it was just so cool. But I shared with this guy, and I was just telling him like what God had done for me. And same thing, I asked him at the end, like, does that make sense? And he was like, it does. Like, I'm ready. And I was like, what do you mean you're ready? And he's like, I'm ready to be a Christian like you.
Yeah.
And I was just floored. I didn't really know what to do next other than pray with him. And then I was like, I know we're supposed to read the Gospel of John, and I didn't know why, because of Christology and all these other big fancy words. I just like, because it's about Jesus. So let's start there. And I wish I could tell you like it was this perfect story. And it turned out, but like a month later, the girl that I was going out with, he stole. And so I had my pity party, and I had all these doubts at 16, and then quickly God pulled me to my senses.
Yeah.
But again, like I would say, as far as tips, I'm convinced, and I know you are too, that it's kind of like for those of you who love military stuff. The air war is phenomenal because it kind of softens the ground environment and it gets it ready for boots on the ground. There's nothing like praying and asking God to change and prepare that heart for that gospel conversation, because you think about it, like it's a supernatural thing that's going to take place, right? You and I mean, if we could impart one thing to the listeners, it's like we don't save anybody. Only God does the saving. So why would you not go to him and ask him to change that heart in advance?
Definitely.
So I would start there.
And there's a common phrase with that. You talk
to God about people before you talk to people about God.
Yeah.
And, like I've shared with our buddy Greg, like when I bought that black truck, all of a sudden I saw trucks that were black everywhere. And when I pray for lost people, I see lost people. And so I think it goes back to that common ingredient too. Do you care enough to get involved? Because there is risk, right? I mean, Greg has that shirt, awkward's awesome. But it's like, it is a little awkward because you are being a little intrusive. But if you believe what you believe, you need to be intrusive, because people have a real enemy out there and there's a real threat, and some of them don't even know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's where, that was actually one of the first points I wanted to bring up, was, pray for those opportunities. And when we pray for those opportunities, we're going to be more aware. We're going to, see God answer those prayers if we're open to seeing those. And there's sometimes where, I'll see opportunities after the fact, I'll be like, oh man, that was I was like, that person was right there, and I could have brought up this, and I was, and at the end of the day, like when we're more prepared like that by, through prayer, then we're going to see more success in bringing those up. The other thing I'd recommend is obviously being prepared, just by being ready to initiate a conversation. And there's several different ways you can do that. For one, like, be friendly to people. Like, you never know what people are going through, and they're just waiting for one kind word, or you never know like who's just really feeling awful about themselves right then, and just one act of kindness can really change someone's day and open up that door for the gospel. But also be prepared with, like our church produces those invite cards, that we have at the welcome desk. People can take those and invite a friend to church, or where you can say like, hey, like, I'd love for you to come out to my church sometime, or have what they call gospel tracks, where I always keep them in the door of my car, like in the little, like, cubby hole thing that, everything gets lost in, whatever. And like, so I can get them in drive-throughs, or, if I'm, stopped at a stoplight and I see someone, I can, hand them some stuff. And so when it comes to, even be prepared in that way of just, knowing that you can be prepared. I think there's analogy there where sometimes we're out on a boat and all of a sudden fish jump in our boat and we don't know what to do. Like, it's like God just dumps these opportunities on us, and we're like, this has never happened. Like, I didn't know I was going fishing today. And so, but if you're ready to go fishing every day, then you're going to see, how much more prepared you are for that. But
Back
also,
in my truck, I got fishing poles. I'm
there you
ready.
go. There you go. And so I think also, like, in an increasing automated society, because you have like self checkout now, like you're not interacting with as many people. There's like robots that you interact with more than, actual physical people anymore. And so, even sometimes it's not even available, but I try to avoid the self checkout, so I'll have to interact with people, and I ask them how their day's going, or what they like about their job, or when they're getting a break soon, and what they're going to do on the break. And so with that, like, just being friendly to people, I've seen that really opens up those doors. And then also, just like, if you're out to eat, so sometimes it's like you can go get takeout and you don't have to pay the extra tip. That's like always a temptation. It's like, okay, we save money by just get a takeout, take it home, whatever. But sometimes you just be intentional by eating, at a restaurant that has a waiter or waitress, and just asking the waiter or waitress before you pray for your food, hey, we're about to pray for our food. Is there anything that we can be praying for you for? And that rarely is closed down as like a no, I don't want to prayer. Usually people open up and share what's going on in their life. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, even hearing that, I remember years ago, one of the main influences in my life when I was younger was Charles Swindoll. And I just consumed everything that man was writing. And I remember reading about, he was working, I believe, through a seminary in a machine shop. And he loved to debate people. And so he had this one guy, and I don't remember the guy's name, but like every day they would go at it. And like he was just so full of himself, he said, and he just wanted to obliterate this guy in debate. And after a year, this guy came in and just held his hands up and is like, I give up, Chuck. I give up. You win. And his eyes lit up and everything. And the guy could tell, like, oh, you totally misunderstood what I meant by that. Like, I will never be a Christian because you're a jerk. And then he never spoke to him again. And that totally changed the course of his ministry. And you can tell if you read his works that it's very grace saturated. It's this kind grandfather sitting on the porch saying, hey, come sit beside me, young man. Let me teach you about, the grace of God. Yeah. And so he learned the importance of winning the person instead of winning an argument.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good for any of our listeners or followers of Christ. Like, we need to understand how much God loves that person. And like, this isn't about winning a debate. It's about showing love.
Well, and that's where even like that, the way that we communicate, like how we share the gospel, the ask, admire, admit, the ask good questions, admire what you can about their faith, admit that you need Jesus just as much as they do. And that's the key part of, like, we're all sinners in need of God's grace. Like, we're not from this high horse speaking down to everybody. Like, we figured it all out. We've arrived. Like, it's none of that. We are just beggars who've found the bread. We're just trying to show other people where the bread is. And so
That's right.
When it comes to even that humble approach to realizing that we're sinners, it deflates that bubble of, oh, I need to be at a certain level of Christianity before I start sharing my faith. And we even encourage people to, do what we call like raise the flag, where you just like mention that, hey, I'm a Christian, or like I went to church this past weekend, and just kind of bring that up as a level of accountability, like especially with relationships at work or neighbors, and that can be a stepping stone for, well, do you have any faith background, or do you believe anything about the Bible or Jesus, or what what do you believe about afterlife? And those entry questions can be really helpful to establishing that relational evangelism, that lifestyle evangelism.
That's good.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I want to point out too is is really making sure that we're prepared as Christians in a digital world too. Like, so now there's a whole new mission field that you can use online, where before it's like you had to have a physical interaction to actually talk with someone physically, or had to call on the phone. The next generation is not even using the phone. In fact, they don't even know how to dial a rotary phone, or like even punch in numbers. Like they use everything with voice now, or with voice to text. So they just text or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
I think phone calls are even going to be hard to do. So what do we do in a social media driven digital world? How are we communicating the gospel in those tangible ways? And I think in some ways, like even the fact that we're filming this now is showing how important it is to reach people with media and with that. And so, any recommendations that you have on reaching people with a new digital world rather than just the old fashioned physical way?
Yeah, I guess knowing we have different types of listeners, the fact that they're listening to a podcast means they have a little tech savvy. I mean, I'm barely capable of finding a podcast myself, but really it was spending time with you, and even you just conveying your heart along with other people, in the church and on the staff. Like, how do we equip the saints? Going back to episode 1, like, what's the heart behind this? I guess you and I, we get enough time with each other, so it's not like we just want to sit down and film episodes and be goofy. Like, it's like, how do we promote the gospel? And so, again, I know you have a lot of experience with it, and so we're looking at like, okay, let's put this message on YouTube and Spotify and whatever platforms are out there. Oh. And so I think that's, like you said, like, this is one living proof of that. I think another thing I'm learning over time is that people will read a certain amount of information. So that's why I do that weekly devotion for the church. And again, like, it's another way to just pull something, the way I do the devotions, as you know, is I just take it from the Bible reading plan and I just kind of let the Lord lead it. And, just again, like, it's like a short conversation over a cup of coffee, but just to encourage people, because today, I think if we did a self-assessment on the church, Bible literacy is not where it used to be. And so even helping people understand not only how to study the Bible, but how to apply it today, I think is so key. And it goes back to, again, like the different tools that we have on social media, right?
Yeah.
And we're just now wetting our feet in this.
Well, and we have so many opportunities now. I mean, I think like the Apostle Paul would be angry at us knowing that we have an iPhone and connectivity to the world through the internet, like at our fingertips. And so with that, we have like a question that I'm always convicted about when I ask myself is, if I was put on trial for being a Christian on just my social media presence, would I have enough evidence to convict me? Like, what are you known for on social media? Like, what are you known for with your digital footprint, so to speak? Is it that you're just, posting funny stuff? Is it just that you're arguing with people over politics? Is it something that, and so what are we doing to leverage even technology and this kind of new, realm of possibility through connecting so many people together through the internet? We can just point our finger and just say that it's a bad tool, which it can be, or we can leverage it for the gospel. And so there's even one, I think I shared this with you. There was an opportunity that I had on, I just asked people like, hey, how can I pray for you today? And just, I mean, not even like a, that in depth, like that's easy just to post. And I do that occasionally. And the conversations that I've been able to have through that, many of them like through messages afterwards, like, cause people aren't wanting to share, deeper stuff, like in comments, whatever, where everybody can see it. It's been just really fruitful to see like how people respond to that. Just even on a post of social media, and more people see it than you realize too, so there's been people that have seen me post that, never have responded, never have commented or anything. But then later down the road, they're like, hey, I see that you do this all the time. Like, can you be praying for this? People message me like, I noticed that you haven't asked this, today, but I saw that you posted this a couple weeks ago, but can I have prayer on this? And that generates more conversation. So
it's interesting you say that, because I don't post a lot of content on social media, not currently, but the few times I have, it's been more just to pat my wife on the back publicly or something like that. But even just seeing how that can influence or encourage men to do the same, maybe it's, a stoic guy that's like, well, why do I need to tell you I love you? I told you the day we got married, and I'll let you know if it hasn't, if it's changed. But just reminding, like, this is something that, we all need to hear from our spouses, right?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's get into a couple rapid fire questions
All right.
about your past. So
what'd you dig up today?
yeah, so I have, I mean, I don't think this is a real question, but I feel like some people might be wondering this. Like, I mean, you know my heart on this too. Do you like coffee or tea better?
I only heard one word. I heard coffee.
Yeah.
So definitely coffee. I mean,
What did you call tea? You called tea just coffee that you can see the bottom of the cup in?
well, if coffee
Very weak.
was delivered and you can see the
Yeah.
bottom of the cup, then I would call it tea
Oh yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
And again, not hating on the tea people out there. I mean, I've dabbled in tea, and it's like that's pleasant, but
Now I can do
Coffee.
iced tea. You know, that's like what I was
Gotcha.
doing. But as far as like hot tea, I don't get it. I don't understand. I mean, maybe like I guess the only times I drink hot tea are like I'm sick.
sure.
Like, you know, it's like I need something. You know, like,
Well, I've made enough out in the wild that, you know, hot water with a little flavor, you know, a little aroma therapy out there in the wild. That's not a bad thing.
so as long as it's like tea that you pull with leaves from some plant in the
That's
in the
right.
jungle
You know, or
the
animal
wilderness,
fur, you know, like,
fur,
I mean, that's
some
one of the
sticks
better
in
ones.
there. Yeah,
Hard
okay,
time
so,
marketing it.
So like that kind of tea is okay, but coffee is your go-to. Okay, all right. So you know, I'm a big fan of barbecue, and so this question is brisket or pulled pork? What's the better
Brisket.
barbecue? Okay.
Brisket for me, and mostly because it's such science and art. Like both are taking place, and I've never reproduced the same brisket ever.
Yeah,
But it's fun to
and
try.
just, you know, by state, who has the best brisket?
Texas.
Yeah, I mean, it ruined brisket anywhere else. And there's even like barbecue places we'll go to around here in Virginia that
Oh yeah.
I was like, I know you say you have brisket, but you don't really have brisket. Like, and I've tried it, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, try the brisket, it's excellent. I'm like, I don't think you've been to Texas. I really don't. I don't think you've been.
One
to
of the
Texas.
perks of having a daughter and her husband and grandson and another grandson on the way outside of the DFW areas, you're gonna get some good brisket.
Some good brisket. Yep. So, okay, favorite fast food restaurant, and this is how I classify fast food. They have to have a drive-through.
Well, I'm gonna stick with our Almirada and just say Chick-fil-A. You know,
Yeah.
promote
I mean,
the
is that
cause.
even a real question? Yeah. I guess there's some people that might be, you know, watching or listening to this that don't have Chick-fil-A. They don't have access
That's
to it.
true.
They've never, you know, tasted the sweet nectar of Christian chicken. And yeah, so
I think for me, it's food that I can eat where I won't destroy my clothing while I'm driving. I mean, that's part of the equation.
Yeah.
I won't get certain things if I'm driving a long ways, just because. Yeah, you need a nice package for your food.
Definitely. Good call. Okay, so worst food you've ever eaten before.
Yeah.
I think there's a story behind this.
I'm sure there is. I define worst food by how it impacted me personally. And so I had some lovely warlords as roommates one time in East Africa, and they fed me some rotten crocodile, and the results were horrific and left an imprint on me to say that would be the worst food I've ever
Now, if
ate.
someone offered you crocodile now, even if it wasn't rancid, would you still not be able to?
I possibly could, but I would be more investigative on how it was prepared, and has it been sitting out in the hot sun of Africa for a couple days to make sure it's extra gross before you serve it to your guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so you might have just answered this last question, but what is the closest you've come to dying?
Felt like dying? Yes. That's a good question. I think it's one of those where I think other men and women in the military probably would respond to similar in that, like, there may be moments where we don't even know, right?
Yeah.
Where God was very gracious and a bullet that was destined for your skull or other body parts missed. I mean, there's those scenarios. I think one of them, and I can't even remember if I've shared it already, but I think there was that one Christmas, you know, I don't think I remember specifically it was Christmas, and, you know, being circled by sharks with my swim buddy as we're trying to bring all the other guys on land. I think God did us a great kindness that night by not allowing us to be ate. I think of other big furry animals, and then, you know, again, like we had a rule of thumb in the jungle: if you held your hand up and you could see an eye on either side of your fist, that crocodile was pretty big. You should probably get out of the water. I mean, and all the different snakes. I mean, my goodness. And so, yeah, there's lots of them. And then, you know, the parachute accidents that, you know, could have been much worse. On and on the list goes. And so, yeah, that's why most people that do a full career, they maybe have a little limp, you know.
Yeah, maybe from even some cliff diving too.
Perhaps.
Limp.
Yeah.
Maybe a story for another day. So, okay, so close us up with a survival tip that you haven't shared with us yet.
Yeah, this one is actually going to surprise some people, but it's like if you want to start learning survival skills, you want to start with foundational things. The number one thing that most people can learn and participate in is swimming, because that's probably the most realistic situation somebody will be in when you consider over half the planet's water. You may find yourself one day where you need to know how to swim to save yourself or to save someone else. And to be competent and confident in the water is got to be one of the best survival tips of all time.
Yeah. Now, as a retired SEAL, do you still get out there and swim?
Not as much as I used to, but it's just access, right? Yeah. And certainly, you know, again, for people out there, I think the great equalizer for us is we had so many great swimmers in the teams, and I was just like a Chevy model. Like, I got the job done, but I wasn't impressing anybody. Yeah. But we had guys that swam in the Olympics, and so pretty high standards. But what I found is that when everybody has to drag 100 pounds in a backpack and it's neutrally buoyant, we all swim about the same at some point in the middle of the night. And so it's just like the great equalizer, just like carrying a big ruck with skis. Like, we all start to ski the same.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but like swimming is just, it's such a valuable skill to have. And I would say you don't really lose that skill, kind of like riding a bike. But as far as fitness goes, I mean, I've never been one that I would dare challenge to race any boy or girl on a high school swim team. Like, I know they'd smoke me. But if I gave them a 100-pound ruck and we had to go out in the ocean in the middle of the night, I don't know. Things might level out a little bit.
Yep. Equalizer. Yep. And so you've been in lots of cold water, warm water, I'm sure, and lots of different swampy areas and stuff. But what do you think is the coldest temp water that you've swum in?
For sure, 28, because salinity of the ocean, 28 is where it freezes solid. Like if it drops to 27. And we did studies, if I remember right, the Canadian doctor, and I won't get into all the details of the studies, but Dr. Giesbruck, and so he would have the ability to know what our internal temperature was, and he would leave us out in that 28-degree water, and most of us would reach that point of no return around 15 minutes. That's about as long as we could like actively just float with a life jacket on, and you'd be in a lot more trouble if you actually were actively trying to swim to shore. Yeah. And it's just a brutal reality that even a collegiate or Olympic swimmer, you know, if you're dropped off a little offshore and you're just, you know, in clothing, like, you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
Yeah. So excellent survival tip. Learn how to swim.
Learn how to swim.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining us on our episode today. If you're watching this on YouTube, please comment, like, share, do all the things to help other people get seen. You can share it with other people, of course. If you're listening to this on podcast, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you'll not miss an episode. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.